other team members, they'll be joining in as we get into the session here, but perfect. So so when you're doing your PeopleSoft, that was when you did consulting for PeopleSoft and implementations there, that was a while back. You said, and you did PeopleSoft and what other platform?
Well, I was saying that PeopleSoft is a form of PeopleSoft is Workday.
Okay, yeah, Workday. Okay.
Yes, and
Yeah.
I mean, many colleagues I worked with now are working with Workday.
Yeah.
I've to Oracle, but most of them stayed with Duffield.
Yeah, Workday is the new beast of systems, right? So
Yes.
So that's fun. I have a lot of clients that are thinking about or have implemented Workday, and it's and you typically have those third-party administrators or that implement those. So it's quite a thing to do for them. So and then you said that you were doing training and development and coaching across different locations as well.
I joined a software company and became a learning and development manager for 13 years.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yes. Well, 7 years, I take that back, 13 years. So the company basically acquired my consulting company, and then I moved into learning and development, which was a great fit since that was my original career path, was instructional technology. So that brought me back into helping people learn. And I did that for 7 years.
Yeah. Wow. And then how did that kind of set you up for what you're doing today?
Because my last corporate position, I was managing L&D for the Asia Pacific region of my company, working in Singapore. And that was really the first. Before that, I was creating technical training. So now I was managing all of the countries learning and implementing the global training, and finally come face to face with emotions and managing people relationships. And I realized my emotions were getting in my way of my work. And that started my path, because the very first thing I did, even while I was working in Singapore, was that was when I first heard of emotional intelligence. So that was, for me, I mean, emotional intelligence had been around, but for me, the first time I heard of it, that was 2007.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I found a consultant to work with to help myself with emotional intelligence. And when I returned to the US, I wanted to continue working in that area, and worked in personal development as well as working with companies. But then later, just coincidentally, about 3 years before the pandemic started, I was still seeing there's more to it than emotional intelligence assessments and increasing skills. There were deeper emotions that I wanted to master. So I started taking more training and worked with a master coach on more what we call emotional fluency.
Oh, yeah. And so you use you mentioned assessments, and so there are certain assessments that you use for emotional intelligence.
Yes, the EQI, and I'm also certified in the Talent Smart training curriculum. That's Emotional Intelligence 2.0. That book uses their own assessment and curriculum.
Oh, cool. Okay, we'll talk about that during the session as well, if you're okay. So tell me, you lived in Singapore for a while. How was that?
Well, it's an amazing place. And of course, I also got to travel around Asia and worked in India a few times because we had a big engineering location there. So I had traveled a lot and worked in Europe before, but yeah, I loved exploring Asia. I loved Japan, China, Australia. Singapore is an amazing place to live. It's fairly easy because everyone speaks English, and lots of options for eating.
That's great.
But compared to Tahoe, it's very different because it's an island surrounded by water. So that was hard. Contrast.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey, Howard. So Howard, I'd like to introduce you to Cathy. Cathy's
Cathy.
our speaker today, talking about emotional well-being for HR professionals.
Oh, we could all use that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes.
So it looks like we have a lot of people are out today, Howard. Let's see,
Oh.
Jules is out, and I think
Sumit.
so, well, I'm not. Sumit may join. I didn't see him cancel, but
Okay.
so Char is out as well, and Wendy is diving in Mexico right now, so she's going to be out.
She's practicing emotional well-being.
Yes.
Right.
Very important.
So I'll be leaning on you guys to ask questions, because hopefully my voice won't go out by the end of the session here.
Okay.
But yeah, lots of things to talk about. So I was just talking. Cathy was just mentioning about her time in Singapore.
Mm.
And working out there. And so I had family members of mine that were stationed in Singapore for quite some time. One was a professor at the Essex School of Business, and he was teaching down there. And then another one, his wife is my wife's cousin, and she's a teacher. And so they were in Singapore through the entire pandemic and a couple of years before, but then due to the pandemic, they really missed family a lot, because they were kind of locked down in Singapore and couldn't get back home. And so they decided to go back to France after the pandemic lifted, to spend time with family, with all that time that was lost, right? So yeah.
When I was in Singapore, I think it was the early 2000s, I just couldn't believe the amount of building all over the place. It was incredible. Everywhere you looked, it was construction.
Right, for sure. And then there's some interesting things that are happening there right now, but I just want to let our listeners know out there that we're just kind of chatting to the top of the hour. We got another minute or so before we get started. But about back to Singapore, I mean, all the construction, I know that they had a huge, not necessarily a housing crisis, but there was some government programs around housing, and that caused a kind of the housing market to go crazy there. So I imagine that was probably related to the construction. But interesting island, and the way that they manage there, but beautiful. I mean, the infrastructure.
Yeah, very easy to get around, fairly easy, with public transportation, and everything's clean.
Right. Safe.
Right. Okay, well, here we're going to be getting started here in a few minutes. And so, well, actually, any moment now. So we are at the top of the hour, so I guess I can kick things off. So welcome everyone to the People Strategy Forum. I'm excited about our topic today because last week, of course, we spoke about just helping our people with emotional well-being. And now we're going to be talking about helping those that help others, the HR professionals. And so Cathy's going to be here leading us through that discussion. But before I introduce her, I want to make sure that we go through the cadence and let everybody know what the People Strategy Forum is about for our first-time listeners out there. And our intent is to come together as professionals, and we bring in expert speakers to talk about how we create places that people love to work and engage and elevate our people overall. And very timely, Sumit just joined us, so I'm going to talk to him first about one of our key hosts. So Sumit is out of India, and he's a people strategist. Sumit owns his own consulting firm over there, and he also helps us here at CompTeam, is a thought leader in the HR space, and comes with a great deal of expertise in a lot of large consulting firms. So we're very fortunate to have Sumit here. Oh, Sumit. And then also my colleague, Howard Nizewitz. Howard and I worked together at Barclays a number of years ago, and now he's helped leading a comp team through its success. And Howard is a expert in systems as well as compensation, and comes with a wealth of knowledge and expertise. And so we have a lot of people out on vacation right now. So Char Miller is I believe that she's getting ready to relocate down to her winter haven in South America, down in Mexico. And Jules is in Australia, and Wendy is down diving in Mexico right now. So everybody's having fun, and I'm here in the cold and getting ready for the winter, fighting a cold myself. So I'm very jealous. But I am pleased to introduce Cathy Norris. And so Cathy is our speaker today. We're going to be talking about HR well-being. And so as you can see, Cathy comes with a wealth of knowledge, over 17 years of experience. A lot of that at some larger companies such as AT&T and Walmart. She has been a consultant for a number of years, and also leading training and development at some companies. And so really a pleasure to have her here today. But Cathy, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became into what you do today and how you help people in your journey?
Thank you, Sam. I'm happy to share how I got into doing this. So my journey was that my very first career was teaching high school for 3 years. And then I went back to do a PhD program in instructional technology because I was really interested in how people learn. Did that program and did everything, even my qualifying exam. I'm one of those ABDers because I got to do an internship at AT&T. And once I got into the real world of actually helping people and seeing results from a training program, I was like, this is much better than academia. And I ended up consulting, or actually working at Accenture, which was Anderson Consulting at the time, aging myself there, but developing training programs. Went from there to implementing PeopleSoft HRIS programs as a consultant, which is like Workday now. And I got to travel and implement HRS programs for several years. Then my company got acquired by a large software company, and I got to move back into instructional technology. So I spent 7 years as an instructional technology or instructional design manager, developing and mostly online training programs for our technical people in our software company. But I got to go to Singapore and manage all the Asia Pacific training programs and implement our global programs for a couple years. And it was in that position, working with all the country managers of Asia and having a lot of requirements for the company, that I came face to face with my emotions. Like, oh, it's not so easy to implement this, implement that, when I have to work with a team of people from very different cultures and countries and budgets. And I was just kind of thrown for a loop, like, oh, my emotions are getting in my way. I'm getting frustrated at work and I don't like this. So I started learning online. I heard of emotional intelligence, and I found a consultant who helped me with my situations at work. And I was also going through personal situations as well. So it all came to a head for me, and I was like, I really want to understand my emotions. So fast forward, I came back to the US, and that large, successful software company no longer exists. They were actually in the process of laying people off, which was also getting really affecting my emotions at work, of course. And I came back and decided to start my own company and help people personally with emotions as well as in companies. And I got a couple emotional intelligence certifications and developed programs to help people raise their emotional intelligence. And yet, just coincidentally, about 2 to 3 years before the pandemic, I still wanted to master more of my emotions. There was still more. I was like, I still don't feel like I'm really managing the depth of them. And I joined a program and worked with the master coach. And then the pandemic hit. So we're all dealing with emotions at this point. And I just really wanted to help what I was learning, help people see there are things we can do. We can become aware of our emotions, and we can manage our emotions no matter how much despair we might be in. I was on the board of my local SHRM chapter, of which now I'm president. And at the time, I offered an emotional resilience group for everyone on our board. So we started meeting, and we ended up meeting for over a year, every single week. And one of the major parts of developing emotional well-being is identifying your emotions, just even getting a handle on what emotions I'm feeling. So we focused on that every week, identifying emotions, and people sharing, identifying what they're going through, being heard, being listened to, sharing the experience with others. And it literally helped them raise their emotional well-being, just doing that. Emailed each other later in the day, oh, thank you, I feel so much better. So that was the beginning of my journey of offering emotional resilience and emotional well-being programs, as opposed to emotional intelligence, if that makes sense. What's the difference? We might want to talk about that. I mean, obviously there's subsets of each other in some ways.
So let's dive into that in just a minute. But the first thing I would love to hear from you, Cathy, is just, I imagine the experience that you had and traveling different parts of Asia and so forth, and working with different types of people have set you up for success, and understanding the different types of cultures and behaviors and so forth that you can expect from a magnitude of different individuals. And so can you tell us a little bit about how working with different cultures has prepared you for what you are seeing today?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. Another part to me that was new was even different, the company culture actually was a little more of a learning experience for me, because of seeing the constraints, and seeing even how leaders were changing because the company started going through hard times, and then the VP of our region started demanding more stricter, more rapid goals, like you must achieve these sales by this quarter. So suddenly everybody's in panic mode and not paying attention to the culture or to their employees even, and making it harder to talk about things like training. That was one thing. And as far as the different cultures, definitely differences between the different countries, Japan, Australia, India. And I'd rather not get into that, because that's really not what I'm focusing on at this point. I think for me, I had not just been aware of my emotions, and certainly not good at expressing my emotions. And I think that's kind of the trend in many cultures, actually. Especially when you're in a corporate culture that's trying to move fast. So, yeah.
So tell us the difference between, you were mentioning emotional intelligence and so forth, and the difference between thought there. So let's dive into that.
Well, for most, there are several emotional intelligence models, most of them from Daniel, I haven't used his name for so long because I haven't been using Daniel. Oh, you.
So I know that there's Ariely. Is that
well, this is what happens when you don't say something.
Yeah.
But anyway, the common model is emotional self-awareness, emotional self-management, social awareness of other people's emotions, and then, oh, this is terrible. I'm like,
so we're having Sumit is sending over.
Yeah, I wasn't planning to talk about emotional intelligence, and what I'm doing in the model now is focusing more on emotional self-awareness as Daniel Goleman, thank you very much.
Daniel Goleman.
Howard. I'm embarrassed. Father of emotional intelligence, and really started publicizing the work back in the 90s. All the tenets are important and critical in leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And they're very behavioral oriented, which they need to be. We have our emotions, and then our emotions drive our behavior. So hence the criticality of emotional intelligence. I found it important for me, and then what I want to share with people now is how having a more in-depth relationship with your emotions, really knowing them, can not only help you change your behavior as a leader and at the workplace, but also raise your well-being.
Yes. Well, I think that's a very good place of what we're talking about right now. I mean, or just what's happening right now. So it's like, so Cathy, you just went through a period where you forgot the name or something, because, we're all under stress right now as we're broadcasting and so forth, and being aware of that environment. There's things that we have to, be human about, right? And these issues. And so, and when we are all under stress right now, what do you see are the key things that HR professionals are dealing with being under stress right now? Because we just came out of a huge stressful period of a number of years. And then also right now, as we know, mental health has reached the top of the list of main concerns of organizations. Mm-hmm. And so what are HR professionals saying that's stressing them out the most?
Yes, thanks for asking. When I really had an aha about 5 months ago, because I've been working with teams in companies on emotional well-being, and I realized if anyone needs help with emotional well-being, it's HR professionals they are my community. As I said, I'm president of my local SHRM chapter. I've been working on the board with HR professionals now for 7 years. And I was like, right in front of my face. Why don't I focus on helping HR professionals? Because they take care of everyone else, but no one takes care of HR professionals. So I started by interviewing 25 HR professionals, and the top 3 challenges that came out of my 25 interviews. The first one was, and I'm using their own words here, a combination of their own words, the constant roller coaster of interruptions in the day where everyone's request is urgent and there's never enough time to get everything done. So there's so much in that, right? The overwhelm, everyone's requests coming to you, you never get to really plan your day, and there's constant change. So that's top one. Another one is handling their emotions in difficult conversations in the moment, but common for all of us probably. And another one also, which surprised me more, of the top 3 was just not always knowing what to do, because HR is a role all of its own. I mean, you're serving employees, you're serving leaders, you're serving the company. There's often not a right answer. There's not a book you can look up, what should I do in this situation? And sometimes you're going to make one group happy or not the other. And of course, normally you want to make promote the company. But then sometimes the company might needs help with compliance, and you have to stand up for that. So just second guessing themselves and not sure how to handle certain situations.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the first one that you brought up, which I think is a huge issue. I mean, as we dealing with the roller coaster of change. Yeah. Right. So even before the pandemic and several years ago, 7 years ago, we probably all remember the concept of the open door policy, right? Where the thought is that leadership and HR professionals keep their door open so that any moment people can come in and they're accessible, I guess you could say. But then also, in getting so many things done, that constant disruption of people bringing things in, problems and crisis keep us in a stressful state. If we're trying to get a project done and so forth, it's difficult to change gears and focus and deal with the different crises that come through the door. And so, so how can HR professionals balance the ability to be accessible and then also have the ability to get things done at the same time?
Certainly there are structural steps HR professionals can take as far as organizing their time and having policies. And one part of programs that I'm offering now is just giving space for them to share each other the practical things they're doing. What I like to bring to the discussion is mindset, because the fact is they're always going to be interrupted. It's the nature of the role, unfortunately. So it takes a mindset shift of knowing, accepting that you're not going to get everything done in a day, and yet it'll behoove your well-being to not take it home with you and give yourself and replenish yourself, because you can't feasibly do it all. So that's one of the things that I'm helping people look at in working with them. And then again, understanding your emotions, especially in the moment, because that's when a lot of the triggers can happen. In fact, a common reaction when being interrupted, and believe me, I think, well, I say believe me because what I'm finding is a lot of times, as I wasn't used to expressing and feeling my emotions. So I was surprised back when I was having emotions. I was really surprised. I thought, well, I'm being courteous. I'm trying to, be nice to everyone, and not really admitting that, like HR professionals who are always interrupted, actually, there might be some resentment there. I mean, I've told you 5 times, I sent you an email about this, and now this is urgent. But you can't, of course, share that and even understand that. However, the process of understanding what emotions are underneath you, so when you have a minute, you can just kind of, oh, I see what I was feeling, and then you can let it go. But if you don't recognize it, it just simmers and leads to exhaustion.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is that, HR is sort of promotes itself as, being open to management, employees, and you're constantly hearing issues and concerns. But, where's the HR folks? Where do they go to unload?
Yeah.
So, you need time to reflect. And I think the other pressure, as you were talking about, everyone's looking for the answer now. And sometimes you just got to tell people, to pause a little bit. Everyone thinks, their issue is the most critical and the most urgent. The barn's burning and all the animals are trapped inside. And it's, sometimes that time to reflect gives the person a chance to breathe and you a chance to think about options.
Yes, that's so true. And even more, what's wonderful about working, first interviewing 25 professionals, now I'm doing a pilot program. And in my program, I have a range of experience. And it's wonderful to learn from more experienced HR folks who are like, I finally learned to just listen. Like, I'm getting I'm feeling emotions, but if I just notice that and then ask that person who's bringing you this mess or whatever, who's triggering you, for more information, or how do you feel, just anything, asking and listening more can help diffuse it for both you and the other person, but especially for you, so you can take a moment. Yeah. So it's not often simple strategies, but the trick is catching it.
That's right, and setting expectations, I think, as well. So, Sumit, what do you think, and what do you commonly see is time management techniques to help be, I guess, present at more times, but then also handling things in a timely manner?
I think for HR, it's important to, I mean, using an airline analogy, I'd say put on put on your own oxygen mask first before trying to help others. So being self-aware, being aware of what kind of challenges are around and trying to solve them for yourself before you start diving into supporting other people. And that's why I mean, I've used this analogy when coaching HR leaders or HR teams, saying support yourself, your own people, and then enable them to make a difference to the rest of the world. So I'd love to know, Cathy, what you think of this.
Oh, I love that, Sumit. That's very true. And that's what came out of a lot of most of my interviews is people said, oh, I don't do that. I got into this because I really love helping people, but then I forget to take care of myself. And one of the things that I'm bringing with this, with my program is simply, what do you love? What are your passions? Helping, because we can get so caught up in work, and I was very guilty of that too, to not fill our own cup. And to be able to fill yourself, and there's so many methods to do that, and so many techniques that build your stress tolerance instead of coping strategies. Actually, going out in nature, expressing gratitude, those kinds of things we know scientifically they can help us. And also very important for each person, what is it that you totally love and how are you still doing that? Or are you even appreciating it in your life? Or do you need to get more of it into your life? And I think that's absolutely critical as well. Because when you're happier and you're filled up, then you can better help others.
I completely agree. And I mean, I think on the counter side, the risk is that if you're not happy, if you're not fulfilled, you probably end up reducing other people to just numbers. How many employee queries have I resolved today? How many transactions have I done? Rather than looking at others as people, which is key to the role, right?
Right. Oh, I also wanted to add to that, Sumit, what you said about helping other. One of the questions I asked in my interviews was, in an ideal day, what do you want to, what would make a day ideal for you in your HR role? And almost everyone said to see that somebody grew, to help an employee grow, or to help the business grow. That's what they really want and yearn for. But in the day-to-day roller coaster interruptions, that often doesn't happen. But that's what they really want to see happen. Yes. And by being human, by helping to pay attention to their own emotions and to employees' emotions, that may help bring that desire to fruition.
For sure. I think that everybody likes to have an impact. And I think that HR people in particular are like to help, and they like to help others and provide structure for consistency and providing that assistance. So I think that that is common. But as you mentioned, you have to take care of yourself, or pretty soon if you give and you give and give, then you have nothing left. And so filling your cup is quite important. And so I know that you have this is a session that you're coming up with and that you're going to be starting here soon. But can you tell us a few things about how HR professionals can fill their cup? You mentioned one is kind of getting out into nature and a way of releasing some of that stress. But can you tell us a few other ideas?
Yes, it's so critical to take time for yourself. So even something as simple as taking lunch away from your desk can be huge. Breathing is really, really helpful. And so taking a full deep breath, it provides more oxygen, it slows you down, it helps you get, and also getting grounded, the concept of groundedness. We're always often in our heads. So we do some practices during the program of a grounded meditation practice, which can be 4 minutes, it could be 1 minute. It can raising the awareness of connecting to the present, connecting to the ground, even though it's just a floor, but you're still not totally, it's almost like setting a boundary for yourself, because you don't have to go into the drama of what that person is bringing you or the organization is, but keeping groundedness and being present can help you be aware of what's an emotion and what's facts.
Right. Yeah, I often hear the technique of making sure you take pause before you enter in a new phase or a new meeting. I mean, today we often have these back-to-back meetings, especially if we're Zoom practitioners, right? So I think that it's one thing that we have to be careful of is taking our past meeting or past discussion that we just had into the future discussion with somebody else. And I think taking pause before that session, whether it's taking a brief moment of meditation or just taking some deep breaths before you go into the next thing is critical to show up appropriately for that next session. And but one thing that I think that prevents, because when I'm in a rush and I know that I'm back-to-back meetings, I got to get off this one and jump on the next one, and or it's like I'm already late, I'm a minute late or 2 minutes late or 3 minutes late or 5 minutes late. The thought is that it only takes a few seconds to get grounded. And so I think the realization is just to say, okay, stop. I have 15 seconds there. They can handle 15 more seconds of waiting, and then just take a few moments just to get myself in that new headspace. So I've often found that to be very helpful.
I love that, Sam. I really love that, because you're for many of us, and certainly HR professionals who, there's so much, or, I need to help them first. Oh, but you're putting your mask on first by taking 15 seconds to nourish yourself with a deep breath. Yeah.
The other thing that I often find is that, especially right now, right now is my busiest time of the season as a compensation practitioner. This is where companies all over the world are getting ready to do performance reviews and thinking about how much they can pay their people. And this year, unlike any other in recent memory, there's been substantial inflation across the globe and coming into recession. And so a lot of companies are under stress. They just don't know what to do. And so I have constant people calling me all day long. And so it's a very busy time. And so I'm not able to be as responsive as I am at other times of the year. But what I do find that helps alleviate stress with clients as well as myself is setting expectations, and making sure that people are aware. This is, I do intend to get back to you as soon as possible. It may be, an hour or two from now or at the end of the day or whatever, and then maybe also giving them other options to getting help in the interim, so that I'm not the holding things or holding back progress. And so I think that's a great thing that HR can do to alleviate pressure and keep the service level up for their people. What do you think, Cathy?
I agree with that. And as what I'm focusing on with my program is how to manage emotions. So if HR professionals do get triggered by somebody who's just like really pushing, another strategy is to let that person know what they're dealing with, and even how they're feeling. It's actually, it can humanize you. It's like, and so I'm not saying complain, but I think people think, oh, I've got to always be the professional HR person who never shows emotion to my internal clients, but it will actually help you connect more if you help that person understand what, just in a sentence or so, what you're doing and what you're, maybe a challenge, and maybe even how you're feeling. Oh, I am feeling stressed, or to get this done. Just wanted to let you know. Any kind of emotion can humanize you to the other person, and that's what it's all about, is connecting and being human. And it helps build relationships.
Right. I think that's a great point, because and in the age of humanization, which I like to call what we're going through right now, I think it's really important that when we leaders and HR practitioners, I mean, are human too, and we don't always have it together every moment of the day, and so I think that for us to really embrace that vulnerability and make sure that we can be real with people and saying, hey, you know what, I know you're having a hard day. I've been through it before. I know what you're experiencing, and sometimes it takes, you can't bounce back as much as you'd like, but and then giving people some grace, and then and also allowing people time to recover from some of these issues is important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's critical too, of course. Compassion and saying you hear them, showing you hear them by repeating what they say, and some understanding, and then saying where you are as well.
Right. And so, Sumit, I mean, what do you think? And I mean, how are I know we're talking about humanity and giving people grace and so forth in our culture. How are things being handled in different parts of the world that you see with your clients, and giving them, is humanity and giving people grace and the vulnerability, is that global an approach, or what are some differences you're seeing in practice?
That's an interesting question, and I don't think there's a binary yes or no kind of an answer to it. I think it's a big mix, as we've seen with one of the recent tech companies. Grace is in really short supply from their leader, who's all over the place with firing people publicly and calling them out for various things. I think this part of the world, because we're influenced by American corporations and the American way of doing business, we've shifted. So many of the traditional Indian organizations, at least, they're more accepting, and they're more, let's say, welcoming of the needs of people. But personal example, for the longest time, I used to think of working lunches as something really cool, and I used to almost like look down on people who are, how do these people have 25 minutes to waste? I mean, have they got nothing better to do in life than they could just have worked and eaten a sandwich at the same time? And now I realize how utterly stupid that was. And in line with what Cathy was saying, so one, you believe in some kind of toxicity yourself, and then you go around spreading it by making it the norm. And I think that's what we've fallen prey to as well. But in that sense, the pandemic has been a welcome change, where people are realizing the need to own a lot more of their time. And so they're looking at support from different quarters, including their own supervisors. And I think HR as the CHRO as the Chief Wellbeing Officer is gradually coming to the fore. That's what I see in this part of the world, at least.
That sounds really fantastic. That shift is happening.
It is. It's slow, but I think we'll get there.
Right. I think that there's, but like you said, in moments of stress, there's even leaders are definitely getting it wrong in certain areas right now. There's in technology, there's layoffs that are happening across a lot of different fronts and different companies, putting both managers and leaders and employees under stress. And this takes us to another piece of just being able to handle these crucial conversations and effectively communicating appropriately. And so, what are some tips that you have there, Cathy, as far as having these effective conversations?
The one key thing is to keep in mind it, and not that it's easy, because the trigger is the trigger is what takes you away from connecting. So one thing I like to do is just help people track their triggers first to understand what's happening. Is there a pattern? And I have, literally have a spreadsheet to help prompt my clients. When is this happening during the day? When did I say something I wished I didn't, or react in a way I wish I didn't? What was I feeling? And is there a trend for that? So again, awareness is the first step. And another thing that is key is being aware of your tone of voice and your body language. Are you, and this is where I said it already, but it can help here, where if you say, for me, this is for me anyway, if I say how I'm feeling, it helps me explain maybe my first reaction, which could have been, you're bothering me, and I might have frown or something. And then that can help humanize me to not, so if I hadn't said, oh, I was in the middle of, I haven't said what I was feeling, then the person can misinterpret my frown for directed at them when it may not have been, if that makes sense. So it's again, it's more awareness of your emotion, awareness of your body language, of your tone of voice, though, and then connecting. I connect first. Just connect first. If I can remember that, and I still don't remember it myself, even though I teach it, but connect first. You almost can't go wrong because you're human. It's like, okay, how can I help you? What are you feeling? It's hard when you're triggered, but those are my words of advice.
Yeah, so let's dig into that a little bit more in a situation, because as HR professionals, we often hear things that we wish we didn't hear, and people that are under stress at the moment, such as a situation you might have somebody storm into your office. That person may be a high performer or a coveted employee, and they come in and they say something that triggers you, such as says, so and so said something to me, and those people, they always do this, and maybe talking about somebody's particular ethnicity or sexual preference or race, something that is very inappropriate,
Yeah.
and it could be triggering for an HR professional. But how do we recover from that and redirect the conversation? So because a lot of times we with the a lot of people might say, hey, that is wrong, or you are wrong, or you should not, and immediately come into a confrontational type of a situation and not have the ability to maybe change their perspective. So what are your thoughts there, Cathy?
With ideal awareness, when you would notice you're being triggered, and you would use the term bookmark, just bookmark. It's great to be able to label what the emotion you're feeling. We know that labeling the emotion engages your prefrontal cortex, so it takes you out of the limbic area of your brain, and then you're already then kind of getting out of the emotional response. So labeling for yourself in your head, oh, I am angry that this person brought up this racial slur. Okay, I'm going to bookmark it. And then it really is necessary to revisit it later when you have time, preferably by the end of the day, and just feel that. Let yourself feel the anger with yourself, and just feel through it. Feel through it, because that will give it air, within yourself, and it can move through you. But if you don't address it later, it can build up. So that's a technique for yourself, and technique for dealing with the person. There's a great tool by Cy Wakeman, who the book I've gotten this from is called No Ego, to use with others. And it's to pretend you're like a journalist or something, and you could even, if you have paper, just write down what they're saying and then repeat, and then focus on the facts. So you can say to the person, this happened, what you told me is this happened, and you're just taking out the facts of what happened versus what they think happened or what they're saying happened, to really get the story, to diffuse the emotions with that other person.
That's great. And the other thing is I know that sometimes what what I do is, in a situation where I feel triggered, I often acknowledge that as well. It's like, well, it's like what you just said to me, I find highly offensive, but I want to understand your perspective. Kind of humanizing it. But in a way to open a dialogue instead of prevent one from happening. So and also I think so that's one thing, and I'd love to hear your perspective on. But the other thing also is we talk about maybe hearing something and then giving us some time to digest it, so that we can have a constructive conversation around that. And so so I don't know about this technique. I'd love to hear your thoughts. But if you're coming in and somebody is angry, and they are expressing a lot of stress and emotion, and should we take in that information and perhaps then say, okay, I've heard you. Let's go ahead and let's have a pause, and maybe we can get together in another half an hour, an hour, and let me digest this information and get back to you. I mean, what are your thoughts?
I think that's an excellent strategy to use, and I know successful HR leaders are using that strategy too. It's like, if possible, let's take a pause and talk about this like tomorrow, or set a time to revisit it, or to address it. Because a lot of emotion came in with the problem with that person, and you heard them, and you may be triggered, especially if you're triggered too. That's the better thing to do. So you won't be responding inappropriately. And I mean, it gives everyone time to reflect more on the situation.
Right. And there may be other situations, right, that come up in the daily life of an HR practitioner, that they may get some crisis that comes into their office, or they get a call saying that somebody did this, or they need help, and that's beyond our expertise. Yeah. So what should we do as HR practitioners to really set expectations, understand, and also help guide people to the right solution?
Well, I think you said it. Basically, it's just like, yes, that that is something that is done not just one time, but yes, in the moment, you would need to set expectations again. It's good for HR professionals to have to understand and everyone may be a little different, what their personal boundaries will be with what's happening in their organization, in general, with the different types of situations, so many different types of situations that come up in HR, and what will your boundaries be, and what can you recommend? It's difficult. It really is difficult. I will admit, I mean, you need to address it. You need to do something to
Yeah.
address it, or say that you'll follow up or find a way in the organization to help them.
Right, right. I think that a lot of people that really like to help others can have the tendency of overstepping or stepping too far in that direction, and really it's good to put up these boundaries of what of the area you're comfortable in providing influence and advice, and then and knowing where that boundary is, so that you don't have to say, okay, well, I'm sorry, I can't help you with this. I don't, that's not my expertise, but actually help guide them to finding a solution, something that can actually make a difference in their particular realm, to a certain extent. So I find that to be pretty helpful in my practice. But I imagine it's critical and when we're dealing with behaviors and when it gets in the medical or legal side of things, that it's important to understand that barrier, right?
Right. Yes.
Well, I know we've been talking a lot about helping HR practitioners and so forth. And I do want to take a moment just to acknowledge our speaker for next week, and I know we're coming to the top of the hour here, so let me go ahead and introduce our speaker. And so our speaker for next week is Michelle Harris, and we're going to talk about the top tips for transitioning into your first leadership role. And so what Michelle helps people do is become leaders, become managers for the first time. And so setting expectations around that and how to have these critical discussions and as managers have. So one thing I just want to make critically important in what we're doing that I often find in my practice is that companies and leaders often don't really understand fully the full role of what it is to be a manager. A lot of times they say, well, is this person, I ask them, is this person an individual contributor or a manager? And then they often say, well, they manage a process but they don't really manage people. Well, the privilege and complexity of managing people is quite an art and a science. And companies like BossTrack help us figure out how to become a manager and do that appropriately. It's not, management needs to be taken more seriously nowadays, I believe. And I hope, Cathy, you can agree. I mean, with these critical conversations that we talked about right now, I mean, they're difficult conversations, and it takes, you can't just go blunder into it, right? You need to have some, we can do significant damage to ourselves and others if we don't come from the right place. And so tell me, Cathy, I know that you have a workshop coming up and that you are a virtual workshop where we work with a group of people to take them through and help them with well-being. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I'll just say that what we've been talking about for HR professionals and who have really distinct responsibilities and challenges and demands in an organization, but all of these techniques are useful for managers and leaders also. I am now piloting a program called Emotional Wellbeing for HR professionals. So I wanted to take what I learned from the interviews and try these strategies that I've been talking about and helping my pilot program participants practice these strategies and see what their results are. And I'm planning to offer a full program of emotional well-being for HR professionals in January. So I will be launching that program then.
And so how can people contact you to find out more about that?
My email address is Cathy, C-A-T-H-Y, at cathynorris.com. I'm happy to answer any emails. Also on LinkedIn, please reach out, message me on LinkedIn as well. And I'm happy to share any of the tools I've mentioned too. So I would love to anything I've talked about. If you'd like a tool, reach out to me. I'll send it to you and hear how you're doing with it.
Perfect. And so for our listeners out there, if you have any questions here in the next 5 minutes or so, please put them in the chat, and so we can ask those directly to Cathy. But Cathy, as we're waiting for that, you mentioned some tools. I imagine there's what are the different tools that you use to help measure well-being and so forth with leaders in HR?
What I'm doing in my current program is providing tools to help the participants become aware of their behavior. So one tool is a tracking worksheet on behaviors that trigger them during the day. So trigger behavior tracking tool. Another tool is just a massive list of emotions that can help you practice identifying your emotions. Practice and with a questionnaire, what emotions am I feeling today? Just practice this on a daily basis. But a list of emotions is very helpful because we kind of tend to the basic ones, right? I'm mad, sad, glad, frustrated, stressed, overwhelmed. A lot of times there's something underneath that, and taking the time to really investigate. So emotions list. How about finding your passions? What are your top passions? I have a tool for that too. So if that's something you need help with, reach out to me.
That's great. Thanks, Cathy. So yeah, like finding your passions, I think that's so important, not just in work, but also just what you like to do outside of work, and just realizing what brings you that sense of like you mentioned, filling your cup, that sense of relief, and where we can kind of find solitude and recovery during our day to take us back into what we do in our work to be present, right?
Yes.
So perfect. Well, thank you so much, Cathy, for all the wisdom you've spread today. This has been great.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. This has been a really great conversation. I got some ideas to try as well, Sam. So I really, really enjoyed talking with all three of you. Thank you very much.
It's been great. Thank you so much. All right. We'll see everybody next week on the People Strategy Forum. All right. You take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.